All right, time for your daily dose of unabashed alarmism. Why, might you ask, am I so unapologetically alarmist about the end of the world as we know it as we approach the 0 day? Well, it's because when we finally do get there, we're going to be kicking ourselves in hindsight saying, why weren't we louder? Why weren't we more aggressive in trying to warn people about the inevitable conclusion that awaits? Well, here's the thing. Let's say you take a supercomputer, right? Or even an iPhone could do this. Hell, a Texas Instrument calculator could run this equation. You input all of the geopolitical variables as they appear on the map right now with all the key players and their preconditions with this war and their corresponding nuclear doctrines and whatnot, and you put all that in to the machine and you say, machine, tell me what the outcome is going to be 99 times out of 100. If you take everybody, all the players on the board, at their word, the inevitable conclusion is going to be nuclear war. 9 times out of 10. Both sides have preconditions. Both sides are saying they're not going to back down unless we get peace talks, unless we get concessions, we get nuclear war. Okay? So understand what is happening right now at this moment in time. Drones are currently attacking Moscow again for the umpteenth night in a row, and S-200 missile systems are firing on Moscow. This is new. The Ukrainians just started doing this. Now, this is very concerning. When I first heard this, I was like, what? Really? Because apparently they've retooled these in order to use them for surface-to-surface. These S-200 ancient Soviet missile systems were used for air defense, so they're surface-to-air, but now they're repurposing them as surface-to-surface. And they're starting to shoot them towards Moscow. Now, if you would have told me this would have happened last year, I would have said, okay, I'm going to the bunker, that's it, we're shutting things down. Now, because the incremental slow creep has been so gradual, it's been very insidious because we've now reached this point. It's like a frog in a boiling pot of water. We always hear that metaphor. It's being used way too much nowadays, but it's the truth. Right now, we are on the brink, and it's all going to culminate when the F-16s get there. You're going to have the Abrams tanks arrive with the F-16s, and understand what the F-16s represent. The F-16s in this conflict represent a degree of integration and entanglement with NATO and Ukraine, which makes it undeniably more than just a de facto member of NATO, but practically a de jure member of NATO. And from the Russians' point of view, I don't think they're playing word games at this point. They're not waiting for NATO to officially bring Ukraine into the fold at this point. I think they see what's happening, and they're playing this one as things ostensibly appear, that the Ukrainians are now fully interoperable with NATO tanks, NATO armor, NATO planes, NATO missile defense. They got the Patriot missile defense systems there, the HIMARS. Now Lindsey Graham's talking about the long-range ATACMS. So it's only a matter of time before, and I hate saying it's only a matter of time because this is the inevitable conclusion, if you take them at their word. Now, the reason why Ukraine is firing on Moscow right now, that is the question. If you are to take Ukrainian intelligence and the American generals, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, at his word, if you were to take them at their word, then you would be led to believe that they're making advancements in the south and they're about to break through Russian defensive lines and they're on their way to Crimea. Now, the other possible explanation is that that is all a ruse and it's actually false and they're not doing good at all. And they're doing this, they're sending these drones towards Moscow night after night in order to provoke a response that will force NATO to get involved in the conflict, okay? Because Ukraine knows that Russia knows they're being fed by NATO. So if Ukraine can be annoying enough, maybe the Russians will have no other choice but to intercept a supply line coming from Poland, or intercept a supply line coming from Romania, or something in the Baltic states. If they can just please get one of those missiles into Poland for us so that they can invoke Article 5 and NATO can get involved in this war, that could possibly be what's happening. So there's two possible outcomes of what's happening. Now, it's very hard to know what's happening because of the fog of war. But understand that if what has happened in the last 48 hours, if that would have happened a year ago, there would have been panic buying, there would have been riots in the streets. You're talking about a 72 drone sortie sent to Crimea just last night. 72 drones. Now, at this point in time last year, in August, you had nuclear Medvedev saying that if you attack Crimea at all, we're going to nuke you. Okay, and this was before Ukraine really was attacking Crimea at all. Remember, there was a time in this war where they weren't even attacking Crimea at all. Then, of course, they attacked the Kerch Bridge multiple times. They attacked numerous ships in the Black Sea. And now it's just a regular daily occurrence that they're attacking cities throughout the annexed territories and in Crimea. So if this situation, this current state of affairs that we're in the last 48 hours, would have happened last year, it would have been chaos. Everybody would have thought, myself included, that nuclear war was imminent. If you would have taken the Russians at that point in time on their red lines, and indeed at that time, those might have been real red lines. But because this has been so gradual and insidious, things have changed and the goalpost gets moved. And it becomes even more dangerous because maybe if it were to happen at that point in time, it would have had a jarring effect. It would have stunned a lot of people and said, okay, no, we have to negotiate some sort of deal. But because we're now so entangled, it becomes much harder once we finally get to that flashpoint to walk things back, I do believe, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So the F-16s, when they finally do get delivered, even though some people say they're going to be insignificant from a militaristic standpoint, they're just going to get shot down by Russian missile defense, while that might be true, it symbolizes a level of integration and harmonization with NATO that is going to be undeniable from the Russians' perspective that they are now fighting the West. And I just want you to visualize for a second nuclear-capable F-16s being involved in this conflict. What that would enable Ukraine to do. Now, Ukraine already has, yes, we know they already have Soviet-era fighters that are somewhat on par with the F-16. But that's not the concern for the Russians. The concern is that these F-16s, or at least could potentially be deployment systems for nuclear weapons, for NATO nuclear weapons, much easier than would be to modify a Soviet-era jet to take NATO guided nuclear bombs, or whatever they're called, the tactical nukes that they shoot. I can't remember exactly what they're called. But so this is why I'm very concerned with the direction of this situation. And what you're seeing behind me here is just another act of sabotage in Moscow, another major fire at some sort of industrial facility. But what we need to talk about, not this massive heat dome that's about to descend on Fire Alley here in North America. We'll leave that for just a second. We need to talk about how they're going to control the narrative. I've been warning people for the last couple months. I've been having a bad feeling, and people have been dropping like flies on this platform and other ones. Some voluntarily, but many, against their will. You have people getting demonetized, deplatformed, shadow banned, demoralized, just giving up. And you also have people now who just realize exactly what I'm telling you. People who are not nearly as cynical about the nuclear possibilities. They're now just saying, okay, yeah, I see it now. I see that this is how this is going to end. If you take both the Ukrainians and the Americans and the Russians and the Chinese and all their allies on their word, that neither side is willing to yield in any way. So this is what they're going to do. Look at this fantastical headline here. Newly declassified U.S. intel claims Russia is laundering propaganda through unwitting Westerners. Well, how convenient. I guess we're all just purveyors of Russian propaganda and we didn't know it. Unwitting. Keyword, unwitting. This is very, very dangerous times we're entering, because understand, as we approach 0 day, the importance of controlling the narrative gets more and more important. Like, you know how in Ukraine right now you can't take pictures of things, right? It becomes more authoritative, it becomes more of a military dictatorship than a democracy as you approach, the end. And the same thing is going to happen here, is that when they know we're getting close to that time that they might have to shuttle Biden off to the bunker, they're going to have to get a much greater degree of control over the narrative so that, people don't panic. To be brutally honest, panic, because they want to keep people calm. Keep calm. What is that old stupid saying? It goes well with the stupid t-shirts I see the kids wearing that says obey. Every time I see one of those shirts, I'm like, what kind of message is that? Obey. But anyways, obey and keep calm and, shut your mouth, or whatever the hell that saying is. So that's what they want us to do, okay? So now get a load of this, though. Because U.S. intelligence agencies believe that Russian Federal Service, FSB, basically their CIA, is attempting to influence public policy and public opinion in the West by directing Russian civilians to build relationships with influential U.S. and Western individuals, then disseminate narratives that support Kremlin objectives. So this is all par for the course of the vilification of the Russian diaspora. It's what you would see before you round them up and put them in the camps type thing. The same thing that happened in the internment camps in World War II with the Japanese, okay? So you're seeing this level of paranoia and xenophobia start to emerge, and this is very dangerous because you're getting to the point where they're becoming so desperate to control things that they're really going to use this very roundabout method of trying to say people, even if you don't have a direct affiliation with somebody, they can just say it was inadvertent. This is involuntary dissemination of propaganda, unwitting Westerners, right? Oh, they're just silly. They don't know what to think. They can't think for themselves. And while there might be some real Russian disinformants out there, don't get me wrong, there's some people I suspect, I question whether or not, they've been paid by somebody in a circuitous way. Most people are just, they're using their best judgment. And if it comes out that maybe they were the purveyors of Russian propaganda, it's usually by accident. So I try to weigh both sides of the story, but this is very concerning. And it's causing a lot of people to basically just jump ship. A prominent figure in the Twitter space, he only has 1.5 million, I say only, for Twitter, those are pretty decent numbers, I guess. But a fairly outspoken individual, vociferously in defense of the Russians most of the time, but regardless. He says, I'm reducing my time on Twitter. This is Kim.com. The direction of the world is set. There isn't much we can do. I'll be back when we reach the critical phase. Wishing you all the best. And this is the demoralization that I'm talking about. People realize that the end outcome of this is a nuclear exchange, and that they pretty much have to wait till we get to that point where the F-16s and the Abrams tanks are looking across at the Russian tanks and the Russian Su-57, whatever they decide to throw into the fray at that point in time. So it's not looking good, my friends. This is really, really scary times. And you know what else got me thinking? Just to give you the rundown of what's happened in Ukraine in the last 48 hours, because it's staggering, and just understand that if any one of these things would have happened a year ago, lots of people would have been rounded up and headed to the bunkers. You have a massive attack on Robotyne, which is a offensive into the annexed territories. Okay, so Robotyne is, let me just give you the once over here. I usually don't do this kind of micro-analysis, but this is kind of significant right now. So the blue area here is the reclaimed Ukrainian territory that they've claimed back from the Russians. You can see how dense. These are all Russian defenses, these little red triangles. Now, when you zoom in, it's not that dense. This is actually, a few installations every kilometer or so. But you can see they've almost taken this village of Robotyne, and their plan is to break through these Russian defenses, blitzkrieg style. Well, not really, because it's going to take them 6 months, they say. But then they're going to go down here, maybe to Melitopol. They're going to find a way. They're going to surround Tokmak and maybe come down to Mariupol. And they're going to find a way to cut off this land bridge so the Russians can't reinforce Crimea, because Crimea is very strategically important to the Ukrainians. They need this access to the Black Sea. That's why NATO wants it so bad, okay? Because it gives them a huge level of control of not only this region, but access into the Middle East and all those other places. But if Russia goes all the way to Odessa, then they are, for all intents and purposes, FUCK'd. They're screwed. So they want to cut them off here, backfill into Crimea, bomb the Kerch Bridge so the Russians can't reinforce in this direction, and then it's game over. And then that's when, of course, the Russians will never let it get to this point. You see, the Russians have defensive lines in Crimea as well, because they understand that this could very well happen. So once the Ukrainians, if they were to get past this point, nukes are flying. I don't care what people says. I'm betting, I'm not going to bet the house, but I'm betting a good chunk of my total net worth on the fact that the nukes fly before the Ukrainians get across this line. I mean, at that point, but the thing is, it could happen so gradually and incrementally at this point in time that you just never know, because even an attack on Crimea was unthinkable a year ago. Now they're flying 70 drones in one shot. Russians claim they're all being shot down, but eyewitnesses on the scene said that many made it through. This is just yesterday, guys. There was an S-400 missile defense system destroyed in Crimea. This is a multi-billion-dollar system. The brains of the system were destroyed, allegedly. So you have this ongoing offensive in Robotyne. The U.S. military top generals are saying that, yeah, this counteroffensive has just begun, and there's another 4 months of this. So, you know, who's telling the truth? We just don't know. Moscow being attacked on a daily. We have the Tula region in and around, where are we going here? Where are we going? We're not going to flight radar. We are going here. And that closed airspace seems to be getting bigger and bigger by the day. But this Tula region here is where the S-200 repurposed missile was sent to, just south of Moscow. So they're actually shooting missiles. This is new. This wasn't happening before. They were sending drones. They were sending a few guys over the border in the Bryansk direction, I believe. And, you know, but this is new that they're now starting to shoot missiles. So that either means they're really getting desperate and they're on the brink of collapse and they're doing anything they can to provoke a response from Moscow. And Moscow realizes what's going on and they're trying to surgically cut out the cancer. We've talked about that whole metaphor before, that they're trying to get rid of the government because they probably have a bunch of sleepers in Ukraine waiting to take the reins on things. There's probably a lot of people in Ukraine who actually support the Russians. I mean, that's evidenced in how people voted back in 2014. But there are probably a lot of people right now who are just kind of sitting quiet on the sidelines, who are probably willing to change sides for the right price. Not all, of course. There's a lot of very patriotic Ukrainians who don't want the Russians in their country at all. But, you know, there's a wide swath of people in there from all sides of the political spectrum. It's not just one homogenous Slava Ukraine. There are people in there who do support the Russians, but right now they're hush-hush. And the Russians don't want to rattle that hornet's nest too much, because then you run the risk of, when you do take over, how do you maintain control? And how do you prevent it from turning into another asymmetrical guerrilla-style Iraqi situation? Well, you have to win the hearts and minds of the people, and you can do that if you have the chain of command in terms of politics down to the local level. You need the local people's support, and you can do that by, you know, making sure that people are on the payroll type thing. But, I mean, tension all over is rising. The Belarusians claim that Wagner is still present there. Wagner has basically been fully integrated into the Russian Ministry of Defense. So right now, the Russians have at their disposal, they still have Wagner that's now been absorbed by the Belarusian military and the Russian MOD. They have the Spetsnaz, Secret Service guys. They have the Donetsk People's Republic, the Luhansk People's Republic militias. They have the militias of the annexed territories. They got the ride or die Chechens, they got the, who else do they got? I can't remember. But there's all kinds of different sects that Putin has kind of playing off each other. And of course, the Belarusians are their own military who right now, of course, they're concerned in Poland because Moscow has nukes on their border. And that's new. This is all new, that they have nuclear weapons on their border in indirect control via Lukashenko. Okay? So shit's getting wild, man. Shit is getting wild. And they even did, I forgot to mention this, a special forces team landed on the Cape Tarkanhut in Crimea. I'm totally butchering that one. Just to put their flag down, do a photo op, and then they got back into their boats and left. Well, that's the Ukrainian story. They claim they went there, they killed a bunch of guys, they put their flag down, and then they left. The Russians claim, no, they actually came, we seen them, we annihilated them, and that was the end of story, or we got rid of half of them. Regardless, they're getting more brazen in these attempts, right? They're getting closer and closer to Crimea. And the closer and closer they get, I don't care what anybody says at this point, I'm telling you, this is unabashed alarmism. We will see the Russians have no other choice but to use nuclear weapons. Now, there used to be a time when days would go by and I'd say to myself, man, am I just overblowing this? Are the elites not this stupid? Is this all just smoke and mirrors, dog and pony show? But the more we approach it, and you can tell by Putin's body language when he gave the speech about Prigozhin, that he's not particularly stressed as he was when he gave that announcement about the coup, you know, that night of the coup when he came out and he was angry. You could tell, like, this guy, you know, he's quite stoic, but when he's emotional, you can tell. And I don't get the vibe in this case that he necessarily was in shock about Prigozhin being murdered. But I don't also get the vibes that he was culpable. But who knows? We're never going to know with respect to who did what with Prigozhin. It's just, I mean, we know it was an assassination. Was it Russian intelligence that kind of through a sequence of, you know, basically like, what would you call it? Seymour Hersh talked about this, how you can have something done at the behest of somebody without them actually knowing about it, so they have plausible deniability. So maybe this was Russian intelligence who did this without Vladimir Putin's direct knowledge. Maybe he said do it at some point, but he didn't know when. The reason why some people are saying that this might have been done by Ukraine and NATO or the CIA is because of the timing. It was done during the BRICS summit. And also with respect to what's going on in Africa right now. Things are heating up fairly intensely. So who knows, guys? All I know is that it appears as though we are on the same trajectory as we were on yesterday. We're just moving a lot faster towards that inevitable end. And now you got the civil war starting in the United States. And BRICS just expanded. Egypt, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, UAE, and Argentina. You know, shit's getting real. Did I talk about this uranium thing with the U.S.? I think I may have mentioned it, but it's very concerning to me that the U.S. in the first half of 2023 purchased more enriched uranium than they have since 2005. So they bought double the amount of uranium from Russia that they usually would. Now, you might be asking yourself, wait a minute, the United States is still buying stuff from Russia? Yes, they're buying things that are essential for the functioning of the power grid. Right now, BRICS, as it stands, controls 80% of global oil supply. The Russians have kind of cornered the uranium market because they provide this enriched uranium that is very compatible with U.S. nuclear reactors. U.S. nuclear provides 20% of U.S. power needs, okay? And this is going to be more and more important. If it gets hotter, if it gets colder in different places, you're going to have more strain on the energy grid. Therefore, the U.S. has been stockpiling this nuclear fuel from the Russians. And this is quite telling because this signals that they know at some point there's going to be a complete severance of ties between Russia and the United States. Right now, they're still laundering oil through U.S. oil tankers in the Black Sea. They're still, bypassing, circumventing these sanctions to get their energy needs fulfilled. But if I was the Russians and I see the Americans stockpiling this nuclear fuel that only you make, and you know they need, you think that they should be bargaining a bit more aggressively with that and using that as leverage in this conflict a bit more, but they're just selling as much as they can to the Americans, and they're probably thinking, hey, this is a nice short-term payout, but strategically it doesn't make sense, because what they're doing is they're going to allow the United States to, and it's great for us over here in North America, but how could the Russians not see what they're doing? They're stockpiling the uranium so that when the time comes to completely cut ties with Russia, they'll have enough uranium to see them through until they can start moving their purchasing from Mexico or Canada, until we're able to get the right type of uranium that they need. So it's very concerning that the United States is purchasing so much uranium. Just on another note, India is not only banning non-basmati rice, they're also going to be taxing parboiled rice. That's 40% of the global rice supply taken off the market. They're also banning sugar. So they're banning sugar exports. I'm not sure how big of a market share they have for sugar, but their cane sugar crop failed due to droughts and all these other things. So every country is stockpiling food, guys. It does not look good. So prices of things are only going to keep on increasing. I think a lot of people called the Fed's bluff. A lot of people, the Fed came out today, Jerome Powell, and he said something to the effect of, we're going to raise rates if we think we need to. But I think the market is kind of thinking, oh, they're just saying that so we don't go crazy. So what did the market do? They went crazy and they bought today. But it's going to end in disaster. I mean, the market is doomed to collapse on so many different metrics. It's just not looking good. And it's not looking good. I'm going to leave you guys with a quote. It's a very, very interesting quote. The real problem of humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology, and it is terrifically dangerous, and it is now approaching a point of crisis overall. That just perfectly sums up everything that is happening in the world right now. We have Paleolithic emotions. That means we're apes when it comes to managing our emotions. That's why marketers like Albert Bernays realize that if you just cater to our most base level primitive emotions, you can basically get people to do anything you want them to. And we are governed by medieval institutions, be they government, financial, religious institutions. This is what we're governed by: medieval, archaic institutions governing these primitive apes at the whim of their emotions. And now we have godlike technology, nuclear weapons. What do we think the outcome is going to be? This is a terrifically dangerous situation, approaching a point of crisis overall. Sir Edward O. Wilson. I don't think he was knighted, but it just sounded cool to say Sir Edward O. Wilson. So hats off to you, sir. You nailed it. I think that's about all I got to talk about. We got a massive heat dome descending over the fire alley in North America here. This is where all the fires are burning. And we're going to see temperatures 15, 20 degrees higher than normal. That is absolutely insane. So just pretty much kiss BC, Northern Alberta, Northwest Territories goodbye. Just get your evacuation plans ready, because it's not looking good. The shit's going to hit the fan. This no-fly zone just gets bigger and bigger. I mean, I know it really isn't technically, but it just looks like it's getting bigger and bigger. Do we got any military activity going on here right now? It doesn't look like it. This guy's ballsy. What the hell is this? Oh, okay, it's Russian. What the hell is this? This is different. Oh, okay, that was an error. There was a plane flying over Crimea, and I was like, what? Sometimes that happens. It's a glitch. But even into Romania, they've really expanded that no-fly zone into Romania for some reason. So anyways, guys, stay prepping because you're on the right track. I assure you. I'll tell you when I think things are getting better. But it doesn't appear like they're getting better. In fact, tomorrow, we're about to get blasted. If you live where I live, we're about to get blasted with a huge plume of forest fire smoke. So it's back to that. I think that's about it. We got some more shots of shit going on in Russia, blah, 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 blah. Let's call it a night. You guys have a great weekend. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out. Oh, and ladies, if you're still watching, LA Police Gear pants, we have them in ladies variants now. Go check out the link in the description. So different sizes are limited, sizes, colors, because of production limitations right now. And it's the best way to support the channel. We got everything you need, CanadianPreparedness.com. Get it while the getting is good. And please go check out some of the recent videos we've been releasing in terms of our celebrity apocalypse survivability rankings, as well as our city apocalypse survivability rankings. We released one on New York City yesterday. I love doing those videos because it just gets me thinking and strategizing about how things might unfold if the worst comes to pass, which it appears, at least with the current leadership who's in power, that's what's going to happen. So get ready for it. Thanks for watching, guys. Canadian Prepper out.